Hey, welcome into week 3. We're flying through this season, JP. Week 3 of the Rice Football Blue and Gray preview show. I'm your host, Matthew Bartlett, director and managing editor at the Roost, joined as always with JP Heath, voice of the Rice Owls, here to call one more game, another one at Rice Stadium. I like getting to play at home early, especially in the
Yes.
evenings when it's not hot. How you feeling, JP? Victory Wednesday. Can we keep it all week?
Yes, let's keep this thing going. I like the wins, as I told a bunch of folks. More fun when you win. Give me more of the McNeese games. I like the surroundings. I like playing USC, but I like the result against McNeese a lot better. But beggars can't be choosers. That's in the past. As you'll probably say again, this is about looking onward and upward. But a lot of good things out of McNeese. However much you want to get into that. But yeah, victory Wednesday hopefully turns into another victory Saturday.
I'll let us cheat a little bit. Give me one. Give me your favorite thing, the thing that you were most encouraged by, what you liked. Just one big thought from McNeese before we turn our attention to the third straight Louisiana team to come to Rice Stadium, which is an odd quirk.
Yeah, like referencing what, all right, get myself straight there. Referencing what Coach Bloomgren said. We'll get to a TJ McMahon stat in just a second, but this will be the third consecutive home game against a Louisiana team. And ironically, to answer your first question, I'm going to start with defense in special teams because I don't know if the offense gets going the way it does Saturday against them Cowboys if you didn't have that defense. Yeah, the special team start, you took advantage of the short field, but I mean, the defense with starting with, I think he wants to be known as Gabriel Taylor now, his 91-yard pick six. And that really set the tone. They forced 5 turnovers. Gimme more. I like that. You kind of thought the offense would be able to move, but it was just as much a dominating defensive game as it was an offensive game. And I think Brian Smith's unit really needed a game like that after what happened out on the left coast.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the turnovers were big. I talked with Luke McCaffrey yesterday, actually, and just kind of asked him, like, well, what changed between this week and last week for y'all? And he said, honestly, we just didn't shoot ourselves in the foot.
Mm-hmm.
And he mentioned his tip pass that got taken back for a touchdown against USC. I thought it was kind of ironic and slightly fitting that it was McNeese that had a ball tipped up in the air that Trayshawn Chamberlain got under. And he said that they told me always run through the football. You never know when a tip is going to happen. They've been telling me that for 5 years, and I finally got one. So that one paid off. Yeah, I thought that was interesting. And as we kind of, go into the Louisiana game, this was a nugget that I thought was interesting because, people that do numbers and math will tell you that turnovers are not kind of sticky. It's not something that you're good at. You just happen to be in the right place at the right time. There are good defenses and bad defenses, but turnovers are just kind of fluky. Well, fluky or not, Louisiana in their past 7 games is plus 20 in takeaways, which is insane. They have had 0 turnovers dating back through the last 5 games of last season, and no turnovers so far in 2022, which it'd be interesting if we could just take turnovers out of both of the Owls' previous games and see both teams, no turnovers. What do you get just pound for pound in both games? Because certainly those swung both of the games significantly. So that'll be something we're looking at against Louisiana to see, what an unstoppable force, a movable object, what happens in that turnover battle. Just kind of big picture thoughts. That's one thing that we got to be looking for. Anything else that, as you've kind of started to do your prep work on Louisiana, what stands out to you about the Ragin' Cajuns?
So we're talking team wise or just any one side of the ball? What do you think?
I'm leaving this wide open. We're starting broad.
as wide open as Bradley Rosner after he juked that guy on Saturday
Hey,
night.
wide open because he got 5 yards of separation off the go. That was
Yeah.
fun.
Okay, since it's probably recency bias, since I was just crunching the numbers and doing the math, looking at Louisiana's last game, I was watching some of the Southeastern game as well, but looking at some of the game notes and that Eastern Michigan game, they had an 80-minute lightning delay. Remember those? Those aren't fun. And they came out, they scored 49 points. 49 points in that second half against Eastern Michigan. Took a 14-0 deficit and scored 49 in the second half. 35 of those were unanswered. So that is a really explosive team, and that's what I would want to know to also answer your question. Chandler Fields taking over for Levi Lewis, a program great. I mean, you talk about statue quality guys for the Raging Cajuns. Levi Lewis was one of those guys, won 83% of his starts. And Chandler Fields taking over, and he's still a veteran guy, one of those redshirt sophomores, but it's been there, I think, 4 years from Metairie. Named the quarterback August 22nd, and he's got a really deep backfield. They don't have one typical workhorse, even though the last game we don't have the updated depth chart. But Chris Smith was their number one guy, but they went to know a guy you know a lot about, Cabot, we were talking about off air, and a really balanced receiving core. That speaks to that balance. That there's not one weapon, but what worries me is it's a lot of different weapons, but it all head of the snake is Fields, and they're going to go up tempo too. It's going to be more like kind of right in between what USC and McNeese were running with the air raid, but it's not an air raid offense per se. It's just more of up tempo. So how do they handle that balanced explosiveness? From what I've seen from the stats and the I'm not Mr. X's and O's, but just looking at the game film, they're pretty explosive. So how does Rice handle that explosiveness? And oh, by the way, we're 7-8 minutes into this. They've got the nation's longest winning streak too at 15 games. And as I answer a third thing, I don't think, Matthew, I can almost guarantee Rice fans don't understand, or that they don't know what kind of crowd Louisiana is going to bring. I've seen it in baseball. It's impressive. And I haven't been on the call for a game against Louisiana in football, but it is going to be a sea of red that's on that east side at Rice Stadium. So big culture, big explosive offense, and I can't wait for the Owls, a home underdog. I can't wait for Saturday.
Yeah, I was going to mention that 15-game winning streak if you didn't, because that's kind of a big deal. And it's interesting because, Billy Napier was the head coach of this program for the last several years and kind of took them up to great heights. You mentioned the quarterback who had been there forever. And I think at one point they were knocking on the door of a top 10 program, top 15 program last year. Which was no fluke, as we've seen the Sun Belt in recent weeks kind of announce their presence on the national stage if we didn't know they were there already. And this is a team that, despite losing their head coach, despite having, a good amount of transfers out of the program when Napier left, was still picked to win the West Division of the Sun Belt, which is a very potent conference, as we have seen. So high expectations there for that program. And I think maybe for better or worse, we've seen, the programs at the group of five level. It takes a couple years of name recognition before you're talked about on the national stage all the time. So like people know what's happening with Boise State. People know what's happening with Cincinnati, with UCF, with Houston. Those are kind of, the name brand, quote unquote. Louisiana has had some good seasons, but past, 2 or 3, they're relatively new to the big boy on the small stage, if you will. So I think people might be kind of underrating how good and what quality this program has developed in the past couple years. So I think this is going to be a really big test for Rice, ranked or not. I think you kind of go through the last several years under head coach Mike Bloomgren. You look at the wins that this program, Rice, has had. Probably the two biggest to this point have been on the road against Marshall and against UAB. And you mentioned the Raging Cajuns going to be bringing a lot of red across state lines for this game. So maybe it'll be a pseudo road environment with louder than usual traveling fans. But I think, just kind of setting the stage for this matchup, and especially you look in, Rice has not been 2-1 under Mike Bloomgren before. A lot of that goes to the fact that they have had, games against Texas and Baylor and Wake Forest and a lot of heavy hitters out of the gate. So it's hard when you're playing those big boys. But you look at Rice, I think we've kind of seen two sides. We've seen everything goes wrong and everything goes right against programs that, USC is a top 10 team right now. McNeese is very, very far. I think the Owls are probably somewhere in the middle. Are they closer to USC in Louisiana, maybe? Or are they closer to McNeese with more work to do? So I think kind of going into this game, we have a lot of interesting storylines set up, especially, I'm not going to get too far ahead of us and talk about December and September, but if Rice can win this game, I'm not setting it up to be a must-win game, but if Rice can win this game, you're 2-1. You need to go 500 in conference play to reach that bowl game that you've been talking about. And if you can beat Louisiana, there ain't nobody in Conference USA you can't beat. So it's going to be interesting. There's a lot at stake for a third week of the season game, I think, for Rice. And this is the point where Rice feels, talking with some of these players, that they've kind of reached that, I don't even know what you want to call it, but they've been building for so long. Just talking with TJ McMahon and Trayshawn Chamberlain and Mike Bloomgren this week, they kind of feel like they're arrived, and they want to show it against somebody that people will take note against. So that was a lot of things, a lot of building. You mentioned a conversation you had with TJ. What's kind of the vibes that you've gotten, and what are people saying that you've talked to about this game in particular, and what it would mean to get another victory?
Well, Bloom said on his show, I host it or co-host it, whatever you want to term it, on Monday night. We like being counted out. We like being the underdog in this one. And a guy I'm co-hosting this Blue and Gray preview with, I remember talking with you before the season started, and it's it's crazy how the first 6 games are on the tough side for Rice, but the last 6, by no means, nothing is easy. But we both said, and I forget if that was also me listening to your podcast, we're talking about the swing games in the schedule. This was a big focal point, and swing game coming up here, because you could see the roadmap. Like, what was that, a couple weeks ago, I think, before the USC, how we all go through, and anybody who says they don't do it is lying. And if this one is like, well, they get this one, then that FAU game looks a little more winnable. Not that it wasn't beforehand, just speaking in totality here. So yeah, I think this is a massive game for this program. What I termed it with Coach, we have the last segment, about 7 minutes or so, where we talk specifically about Coach Desmareaux's team in this one. And it was my term, but Coach seconded it, that this is the right game at the right time. You've been building to so much, and you got on this hand, you've got USC and the story of all 2 stories in the offseason with the Trojans, with Lincoln Riley coming in there, and then they're going to the Big Ten, and Rice is right in the middle of that storm. And then you have these 3 stinking pick sixes. Like, when does that ever happen? 40 years since the last time USC has done that. But on the other end, you really dominated a team that you should have dominated in McNeese. So this one, like you said a minute or so ago now, I think this is the right game at the right time. And let's see if the Owls are that right team to win a game like this, because The Owls win this one, like you said, 2-1. All right. I mean, they're not going to be feeling themselves, but going against UAB, and we know the success they've had against UAB. When does that game come up like we've seen the last couple years? Beating Marshall, beating UAB. Is it this one? Is it again against UAB? I don't think it was the McNeese game. So I responded a lot. I'm really, you can kind of hear it in the voice. Maybe it's the big gulp caffeine soaking through me, but I am really psyched for this one. It is a great litmus test, and I can't wait for Saturday.
Yeah, I think the best way to sum it up, and we can get kind of into their roster and kind of some guys that we're going to look at, but this is a true measuring stick game, and it's the first one I believe Rice has really had this year, because we had no expectations that this team was going to be better than USC or worse than McNeese. They were supposed, air quotes, obviously they want to be 2-0 right now, but they were supposed to be 1-1. This is the first one where we can really stand them up against the opponent that's in their weight class, or we think might be in their weight class, and say, show us. And Rice has had a couple of these kind of measuring stick games in years past, and it hasn't really gone their way. I think of, a game last year against North Texas, where that was a game where if they want to get to a bowl game and be the program they want to be, they got to beat North Texas, and they didn't. Even the games you look back against UAB, that really doesn't qualify as a measuring stick game, because I don't think anybody thought Rice was supposed to be in the contest. And yeah, they won. So they've proven that when everything is right, they can beat anyone. We've seen that from this team. What we haven't seen is just excluding an incredible performance by all sides of the ball. Like, can you win if you don't play your perfect game? Like, it's not a terrible game. It's not a perfect game. Can you just play good Rice football and go blow for blow with somebody? So that's what I want to see this weekend. And it's going to be interesting because Louisiana has, I mentioned the transfer portal was kind of mean to them with the coach transition happening, but they do return 5 all Sun Belt first team all conference, first team all Sun Belt conference.
Always confuses me, no matter the conference, like all SEC.
And then when it's Conference
third,
USA, it's Conference USA, first team all conference. You're like, how many conferences are we throwing in there?
First team all CUSA. Yeah. First team all Sun Belt. Yeah.
There you go. 5 of those guys, 4 of them on defense. And that's the side of the ball that I think we can start with, kind of looking through the Raging Cajun defense. We haven't really seen much of a test. You mentioned games against Southeastern Louisiana, Eastern Michigan, so probably not heavyweights, at least not that we would tend to believe. But what do we think about this defense for those all-conference guys coming back on that side of the football and pretty stingy?
Well, as we've said in other podcasts and other episodes of this show, I always look out for the Texas guys, and specifically in our great Bayou City. They've got their leading tackler is Cam Pedesclo.
That's pretty good.
Working on my pronunciations.
There's an EAUX in there if you're not looking at the roster right now.
Yeah,
so pretty
Cam
good.
Pedesclo of the Manville, Houston Pedesclos, and he's their leading tackler at safeties. Generally, again, it's not fair because it's only a 2-game sample size, but when you have your safety leading you in tackles, that again, I don't know, I'm so careful, but I'm just saying most of the time that sometimes that could speak to run defense issues where your safety is leading you in tacklers, but Pedesclo, obviously a talent out there. They've also got an Oak Ridge kid from Conroe, Casey Osai. And then they've got a Corpus Christi kid in Weiser at the nose, and a litany of Louisiana guys. But they also have a back up outside linebacker in Cameron Whitfield from Dawson High School, just down 288 in Pearland. And I mean, they're really, really good, Matthew, like name out of the hat of guys that can do it. And they stack up really well. This will be another huge test. It seems like just kind of hit the button, say it again. Huge test from the defensive line. As far as their actual numbers, they've only given up 28 points in their first 2 games. They hosted Southeastern Louisiana, and then you mentioned Eastern Michigan. So, and they also haven't given up a fourth quarter point as well, even in the blowout of last week. So that speaks to a defense that really tightens its belt as the game and gets better as the game goes on. So, and they've gained opponents have only gotten 200 rushing yards on them on the season. So that totally, as I looked up the numbers, second flies in the face of what I said about their run defense, proving my point that it's not always the case, but they've got a really good run defense as well too. So it's a great test, explosiveness on offense, which I guess we'll get to here in a second, but that defense really fits the run. And as we saw, a lot of guys, how Uriah West coming back in the running back rotation for the good guys in blue and gray. What does that do? As Coach mentioned to me Monday night on his show at Acme Oyster House, that real and Tui also joined us. That really changes the dynamic of that running game. I know we both talked to CJ Anderson, new running backs coach, at different times in the offseason, but when I asked CJ about the running game, this is going back 6-8 weeks. It was, I'm excited about Uriah West. He's had a really good camp, the Jacksonville State transfer. So the Al's more balanced running game with Broussard, Louisiana kid. Can Cam Montgomery get him more reps? We didn't see him much in the last game, but that running game looks to be a big matchup for the Al's offense against this defense.
Yeah, I think it's absolutely going to be key. And just a couple big picture thoughts that I kind of thought on this defense. Across the board, you look at where they sit, about top 5 in most every stat in the Sun Belt right now. And, of course, I would say you got to take that with a grain of salt given the variety of schedules, but we've seen Sun Belt defenses go out and I mean, Marshall is a top 5 defense in the Sun Belt right now, and they played Notre Dame. So they might be just pretty good regardless of the level of opponents. So you never know. So they're top 5 across the board, something that they have done particularly well. And if we're kind of, looking at those matchups, something that we've seen a steady progression from Rice on the offensive side of the ball is this year and in the past, Louisiana does not give up explosive plays. They're a very, very physical and keep you in front of you defense. Easy for me to say, right? I'm even picking up your catchphrases here. We've worked together too long, Mr. Heath. But so through 2 games, 6 plays of 20 or more yards surrendered by this defense. That's second to James Madison, who has 5 in the Sun Belt. Texas State has 5, but they also played FIU. So shrug. But that's something I think it's going to be interesting because Bloomgren talked about this week, the level of explosive plays they were at. And I'm talking beyond, of course, the 75-yard touchdown pass to Bradley Rosner is nice, but I'm talking about the 15-yard
the splash
runs
plays
by Ari Broussard, the ones that mean you don't have to get 6 first downs to punch into the box and score. That's the goal. So that's going to be something. If Rice can kind of hold tight, I think the O-line against this D-line is going to be an interesting matchup. We can just copy and paste. The trenches are important to college football. Yeah. I know we believe this. So that we
got to run the ball, Matthew. You got to run it.
Right. And oh man, do we have any other coaching isms? We'll get there. I'm sure we got a couple more coming. But so yeah, that's going to be a big watch. A very good defense. The offense for Louisiana, I think I have maybe a bit more questions about. I know they have some guys and they can put up points, but if we believe this Rice defense to be this level of Rice defense, how does that stack up? And I know in his press conference this week, Bloom called out a couple guys on offense to watch. I think that probably starts at quarterback. What do we know about what Louisiana is going to do at quarterback and how that kind of side of the ball sets up for Louisiana?
It's Chandler Fields, redshirt sophomore from Metter. We mentioned some about him earlier, but again, I'm not Coach Heath. I am broadcaster Heath, but looked really good. We talked about him replacing a program just icon in Levi Lewis. And last year, he still played in 8 games, but only attempted 13 passes. So it looks like that was mop-up duty. But he's the guy now. Stands 5'10". They really play up tempo. I think so far. I mean, I wish those stupid 3 pick sixes didn't happen in that first game. We get a better judge of the Owls playing against tempo. I mean, we didn't see it too much from McNeese, but the tempo so far hasn't been as bad because everybody. I mean, we're on the 4-2-5 as well too, but I mean, everybody has some version of their tempo. But it seems like a team that wants to play a little faster, and that starts with Fields, who, I mean, you have to think he learned a lot from Levi Lewis there behind center, and balanced running game. Flipping my screen over, looking at their rushing stats, they average 141 yards rushing a game, and they've got 4 guys with 11 carries or more. Williams with 19 carries and Smith with 19 carries. So, I mean, they've quote unquote only have 334 rushing yards, but they've averaged over 4 yards per carry and 167 yards rushing per game. Williams has their most, still doesn't have 100 total yards in 2 games. And Fields is a 58% passer, but he's thrown 5 touchdowns, hasn't had any picks. And they only have 1 receiver, Jefferson. Let's see, he's got their stats are a little let's see. Yeah, Jefferson has 7 catches on the season, but Lumpkin, their tight end, has 3 touchdowns. So they do a little bit of everything on the offensive side of things, and that starts with Fields.
Yeah, a couple things in there, and I just kind of want to go through. I think the running back room is really interesting. They've done a little bit kind of so far what we've seen Rice do, and hey, we have 4 guys. Let's just get them all the football. I think Chris Smith, you kind of talked about number 13. He's one to watch for, a home run guy. Had a game last year where he rushed for 238 yards, which is pretty good. One of only a handful of guys that top 200 last year nationally. So that's good. And then Jacob Cabot, interesting. I remember watching him run, and you mentioned this earlier. He was at A&M, went over 100 yards against Louisiana in a non-conference game, and then transferred to Louisiana. So he's another guy that can hit the hole and go. So they're going to have to be committed up front to keeping the ball in front of them and maintaining that gap integrity. We'll see. And then on offense, I think, or on offense, just one more piece, the wide receiver core. I think the proven guy, you mentioned the tight end, but I think it's going to be Michael Jefferson, number 8 at wide receiver, led the team last year in receiving yards and catches, all conference honorable mention guy last year. He's the one guy that they have kind of circled and said, we got to make sure he doesn't beat us. And what I've seen so far, and maybe you can correct me if I'm being too hopeful, but when you tell Rice and defensive coordinator Brian Smith, hey, don't let this receiver beat you, they've done a pretty good job about keeping that guy. Even, Addison with USC had 2 touchdowns, 55 receiving yards against Rice, went out and had like 182 against Stanford. So I like how that kind of matches up. I'm becoming the biggest fan of Jordan Dunbar and Sean Fresh. I think those 2 guys at corner have been, lights out for the most part. So I feel really good through the air with a younger quarterback, kind of getting his earning his stripes, so to speak. It's going to come down to the ground game and what you can do when you mash up that Rice defensive line against this stable of backs. It's going to be interesting.
And tying a bow on, I know we're down to our last few minutes here, but big receiving core too. I forgot to mention that earlier. Looking at their 2 deep, they've got the TCU transfer and Stevens. By you mentioning Jefferson, that made me think, yeah, they have. They don't have any shrimps over there in Lafayette. Michael Jefferson, 6'4", 204. No shrimp or shrimps. Yeah, shrimp. State school guy. John Stevens, TCU transfer, 6'5", 221. But they also have the 5'10", 5'11", shifty guys too. But Fleming's 6'1". LeBlanc is 6'2". So they're either really big and fast or really shifty and fast too, and really quick. So talking to Coach Wilcher, the Owls cornerback coach, they are really confident that they can go 5 deep now. McCord has moved into that 5th corner now. So that this is going to be a big, it's not USC necessarily, but it's a different kind of big, hefty, Louisiana strong, and prior FBS stop deep receiving core.
Yeah, Miles McCord is your 5th corner. This guy was your number 1 corner in 2020 when you had a top 15 defense nationally. That's crazy. Defense is looking good. Offense is looking good. We're all smiles. Hopefully we'll be all smiles again next week. As always, you got to make sure you're following JP in the booth. Maybe he'll be smiling on Saturday. We can kind of sneak in and see what's going on. That's always fun. We got this one will be, 6:30, ESPN Plus, historic Rice Stadium, new helmets. I tweeted out at the Roost on Twitter the new helmets honoring the first 4 Black student athletes to play at Rice 50 years ago now, which is kind of hard to believe. We're getting to those big numbers. Rice has a lot of historic things going for them, but is what it is. I think that's all we got for this week, unless I'm missing something, Mr. Heath.
We've covered it, absolutely everything. There's not possibly anything we have left.
Not possibly anything else. If you want practice reports, I'll go plug patreon.com/@theroost. We'll get you more there. Have a couple things coming up. Whichever direction I am on the screen, we'll find it. Thank you, JP. As always, that's JP. I'm Matthew here to talk Rice football. We'll be back next week to preview the Bayou Bucket. Speaking of
can't wait.
That'll be fun over across town. But for this week, that's all we got. So we'll see you guys later. Rice Fight
never dies. Adios.